I'm the CEO of a small company, and small companies, it's really different because it's a very hands-on role. In a lot of ways, it's like trying to turn a battleship. Look at the automobile industry. Tesla, as a startup, has completely changed the industry.
I think you're my first official publicly traded company chief operating officer, which is awesome. So for the people that are listening, what do you do as CEO? What does that look like?
It's
like a day.
It varies every day. I'm the CEO of a small company, and small companies, it's really different because it's a very hands-on role at all levels of the organization. So when you think about CEOs, most people think about CEOs of really large companies that are, focused on big strategy issues, just a lot more high-level things. But in a small company, you have to do those as well as dive into the minutia. Issues come up, challenges come up, building your organization, working your strategy, working with your board. It really runs the gamut from one day to the next. I could be involved in a troubleshooting meeting to solving a technical issue one day, and the next day, talking about our strategy on who we want to partner with and what markets we're going to enter. And the next day, how are we positioned from a capital standpoint, and discussions with the board about, how does our balance sheet look? So it really runs the gamut. And it's part of why, having worked in both large and small companies, I personally just find small companies just a lot more fun. Just get to do a lot more things.
Do you have a pretty long day? Are you always on call type scenario?
Yeah, pretty much. The days can run into the evenings. They can take up the weekends. It's a function of whatever's going on. But if you really enjoy what you're doing, it's not work. You're doing something because you know that it's something you're passionate about, and you hopefully work with a really good group of people, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that. And you do something you hopefully will make a difference.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's kind of trickle back a little bit. How long did it take you to get to this point in your life from a professional standpoint?
I actually had my first public company CEO role when I was 45. So
wow.
Yeah, I became a CEO relatively early, but I was fortunate enough to have some really good mentors and good trainers. I worked at companies like General Electric, where I ran the gas turbine product line. So you got to see what makes successful companies successful. Why do they do the things they do? And you take those lessons, especially when you go to a smaller company, and say, all right, well, what of this are tools that we can use without building bureaucracy, without losing the advantage of speed and nimbleness, which you have in a small company. So I got a chance to really have exposure to some really great leadership and great management, and learn some tools that I've adapted for the places that I've been to.
Wow. Are you able to be more agile and nimble with a smaller company than a larger company?
Oh, much more so. People think about big companies having lots of resources, but in a lot of ways, it's like trying to turn a battleship. You can't turn quickly. And what happens, especially nowadays, with so many things happening globally that are affecting businesses of all kinds, the ability to be small, change direction, take information and figure out how it impacts your business and make decisions and act. I think small companies are much more nimble, but it's also why you're seeing, look at the automobile industry. Tesla, as a startup, has completely changed the industry. The industry didn't change from inside. It was a small company starting up that grew and changed the industry, because the dynamics are such that you can do that nowadays.
Yeah, it's really leveling the playing field, I feel like.
It is. You'd always hear, especially in the software business, Bill Gates and others talking about, 3 people in a garage can start a business that can become a multi-billion-dollar company and displace established players. And it's no longer just a software-related things. I think technology across the board, the rate of change is accelerating. Great business ideas and new business models are coming out. Access to capital is probably better than it's ever been. So people who are entrepreneurial and can execute on those concepts, I think, have a tremendous opportunity to do things that are really meaningful.
I appreciate that. Do you think somebody like, let's say, aspiring, so the term entrepreneur for me, like when I hear that word, I think of like pre-industrial revolution, where everyone at some point in some capacity was an entrepreneur. Yeah. Like, you wanted some eggs? Well, I've got chickens, You want some cheese? Well, I got cows. I can milk them. We can curate some cheese, curse some cheese. So it's like, I feel like that mentality is always there. It doesn't necessarily mean it's something that you have to own, that is within your right, that you own, right? But the word entrepreneurial, I just feel like that's just someone who understands how to solve problems. And the level of scale of that problem solving is in direct proportion to your wealth of knowledge or your lack of knowledge and expertise, right?
Exactly. And, and it's also a person's, risk tolerance. If you think pre-industrial revolution, it was more out of necessity. You wanted eggs, you wanted to eat, you had to do something about it, or the alternative was not very pleasant. But now, when we came through the Industrial Revolution and big corporations were born, and all of a sudden people could go to a company and work there their entire career, 30 plus years, it took the risk profile away for a lot of people. But it also, I think, stymied innovation, because it's when people have an idea where they want to go pursue it and find out if it works and take the risk. That's where you really see acceleration in terms of change. And I think that's why the rate of change has just accelerated so much in the last couple of decades here, because people are taking more risk because there's an opportunity to take risk. Most entrepreneurs don't succeed the first time, and it's the things they learn when they fail that really equip them to become very successful over the course of multiple attempts at trying to do things that are different.
I don't really see. Do you see a correlation? Okay, so let me start with this prerequisite of question. Did you have to have a traditional form of education to be in the position that you are in?
You don't have to. I think as you go public, there's expectations and your credibility to an investor base, regulatory agencies and other, that says that you have some level of formal education. But I think it's really a function of what's the business that you're in and how far do you want to take it. If you look at some of the biggest entrepreneurs that have been out there in recent times, they didn't have a formal education. So I think it's a function of, how compelling is your story, what's your ability to execute it, and how much risk are you willing to take?
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I always say that I think it would be great, because you don't know. Everybody can be entrepreneurial, but you don't necessarily know if you want to be the guy leading at the helm. You might want to be the number 57 guy and still make an incredible living and impact. So I guess, did you fall into this situation of becoming a CEO? Like, what was the trajectory leading you into that? Were you just in leadership roles throughout your, I guess you could say the adult or your maturity level of like professionalism, like in your professional career when you've really started to come into your own? Were you leading to that? Like, is that something that you aspired to do, and so you were following the steps in order to take that, or it just kind of happened based on accident?
It was never my goal. I'm an engineer by training, and
okay,
my leadership opportunities really came as a result of wherever I was working, we had a challenge. And there had to be someone willing to put their hand up and say, look, I don't know how to solve this, but I'm willing to put a group together to go figure it out. And as I went through my career, as I learned tools from places I've been, it was an opportunity to say, hey, look, if we have a problem, I have the tools that can help us figure out what's the root cause, so that we can then formulate a strategy and go implement it. So it's really more about, rather than me trying to advance my career, there are issues and challenges that came up in the team that you work with, and you're the person that's willing to stick your head above the water and say, let me give it a shot. It may not work out, it may. And I was fortunate that in the times when that happened, we were able to solve problems, move forward. You get the respect of your peers as a result of doing it, because you're really focusing on helping them succeed, but then it creates other opportunities for you as you go along through your career.
Do you think it would be more beneficial now in today, 2022, and I know we're going back to education. The reason why I ask is because I've seen both sides of the coin. So would you think it would be more beneficial if I wanted to be in a relative field that you're in? Let's say I want to be part of a big company or a small company, but I want to make an impact and I want to have some leadership role. Would it be more beneficial to go work for, let's say, smaller businesses, maybe even local businesses, and gain real world experience? Or would it be more beneficial to go through the higher education process?
I think you need to do a little bit of both because, particularly if you're in the technical field, you've got to have the technical depth to be able to truly problem solve, to innovate, and to have the respect of your peers as you explore solutions. But one of the things that I've seen over and over again is people who come out of school and go right to work for a big company.
Yeah.
They whether they realize it or not, they plateau early because they've never been in a situation where they've been really challenged, where they had to be part of a team that if you didn't figure this out, you didn't survive. And whether you are an entrepreneur starting a business of your own on the side, or whether you are starting in a true startup, I think the lessons that you learn there and the confidence that it gives you and the people you work with pays off immeasurably. And a lot of people have careers and they want to go do something entrepreneurial late or at the end of their career as a fun thing to go work at a startup. It's like, no, you got it backwards. Do that stuff earlier in your career because that's where you really test yourself. It's where you get some life experiences that you can't learn in school. They teach you about judgment, working with people, problem solving, how to collaborate. Those things. The earlier you can learn those in your career, the better off you're going to be.
That's huge. I've never heard it put that way, I guess, so eloquently put, because it does make sense. Like, you want to put yourself in a situation where you can, like, I guess, like it's like being set in the wild.
Yeah.
It's like you got to figure it out. Yep. Or you're either going to starve or you're going to be eaten by some wild animal, right?
Yeah.
So, or have frostbite or die from dehydration, whatever the case may be. So it's like you have to be able to have some sort of understanding of how to fend for yourself to some capacity. And then you're saying once you've been through that and then you go to a bigger organization, you're going to have tools that perhaps some of your colleagues or coworkers or what have you don't. And that's going to, set you apart and is only going to help lead you into a more prominent or abundant career path for you.
Exactly. It's one of those things where when you're tested, and the earlier you're tested, there's a couple things that happen. One is, you start to learn your own limits, and none of us really know our own limits until we're actually put in a scenario where you've got to figure out, all right, can I figure out how to find water, or am I just going to die of thirst? So you have to be personally tested, but that carries through in terms of how you deal with people, because if you're someone that hasn't been tested and troubles come along, your team is looking to you to figure out, does this person know what to do? If it's not a clear path, do they have confidence in what they're, the path they're taking? And do I understand the rationale for why we're doing it? Because a lot of times there's not a good answer. A lot of times it's like, it's one of these scenarios where, there's not an imminently good choice, but you've got to pick the best path forward. And your ability to sort of go through that in a way that is fair, takes all the available input, but doesn't keep you from making a decision, and that people understand where you're going and why, makes a big difference, because then the team can get behind what you're doing.
Yeah. And I also feel like a big part of it is, like, this is what I wanted to ask you. I feel like I've met, not a lot, but I've met a few engineers, and I know some personally, and they are nothing like you, my friend.
Is that good or bad? I don't know.
No, that's great. What I'm trying to say is they're not as, I hate to put a label on it, but let's just call it introverted, right? Very to themselves. Their brains are very mechanically engineered, no pun intended. And so, like, their skill set and their strength lies in, like, being able to develop things and really hone in and focus on one thing at a time. And I've seen that, and I've seen how they communicate. But you seem like a hybrid. Like, you have that leadership ability. You're very extroverted. You're very conversational, and you're comfortable. You can sense that. I can feel it. I felt it within the first 30 seconds of having the conversation. And so that and tied with all of your knowledge and expertise as an engineer, I'm sure that is, that's probably part of the reason why you are the CEO of this company. So would you think, so apart from building these skill sets, being thrown to the wolves and having to defend yourself before diving into something that is, much larger, what about like social intelligence?
Oh, good boy. Really, really good point. The engineers that you're referring to it's not unusual. I mean, much of the field is like that, where you get people that are very inwardly focused. A lot of it is, engineers want to build respect in their field in terms of their capability and depth of their technical knowledge. And that sort of reinforces that introverted mindset. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to work on something that's meaningful. If you are the smartest person in the world about a particular topic or a particular technology that has zero impact, what's the point? So you really need to develop the ability to engage with people, to really listen to what they're saying, rather than making sure they know how smart you are about something. But is there a problem that is out there that you, with your technical skills, can solve? Because if you're not solving a problem, if you're not enhancing quality of life, the way a product works that's meaningful to someone that's going to buy it, or adding value in some other way, you're really kind of wasting your time. You're going to look back on a career where, boy, you were the expert in a particular field that nobody cared about and made no difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a big proponent, especially now where, excuse me, where, I can't tell you how many times I've had some form of communication with someone where not only was it awkward, but it was like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can only imagine how much of a struggle they go through, maybe like on a daily basis with their job, career, whatever. And I always think that there is something to be said about how you carry yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with like being an extrovert or being confident or being a leader or anything like that. Just how you carry yourself. Like I think we all can learn skills in any department, but mastering even a minute amount of skill set when it comes to how you communicate with people, I think is huge. Because this is something I wanted to ask you. What is your take on, I guess, I'm trying to word this so that it doesn't sound. You mentioned something earlier where how can you figure out like a complex situation, and how are you going to be able to lead and corroborate that entire thing and what have you? Something popped in my head, which was the thing that Steve Jobs did so well was he took a very complex, complicated piece of technology and he simplified it so much that it was dummy proof, so that everyone knows how to use it. And that's why it became the biggest company and one of the most popular phones, the iPhone. My question to you would be, do you think that the biggest misconception when it comes to leadership in any kind of organization right now is that people are trying to sound too smart and they're not able to convey with like normal language?
I don't know if it's the biggest problem, but it's certainly, particularly in the technical fields, it's an issue. What I've told our guys multiple times, our engineering team, when we're working on issues or when we're engaging with other companies or customers, is, think about if you were trying to explain the benefit of your technology or what the issue is, that you're explaining it to your next door neighbor. Your next door neighbor has nothing to do with your field. If you can make them understand it, then you are starting at a level where people can appreciate what you're telling them. And depending on what their experience base and knowledge base is, you can either take a deeper dive or spend time making sure they've got enough context to understand why what you're doing is of value. And it's really hard for engineers because we speak in acronyms, we have our own language. And
you guys speak in tongue.
We do.
That's all I'm going to say.
We really do. I actually had a slide in a presentation at one point in time that was nothing but acronyms, and the entire audience understood exactly what it said.
Wow.
And I did it to make a point that we need to communicate not just amongst ourselves, but to people that are in the sales organization, with customers, people in finance. So to give them context so that they can actually add their own value because they actually now understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations where I'm like, I always felt like the more knowledgeable you are on the subject, and this could be just my own interpretation, right? Because it's an observation. But I've always felt that when you really know like a subject, you're able to convey it in very simple terms. And those that only know a little bit try to make it more complicated than what it is. Like I've had that. I've had people on, and just instances in life where, like, somebody's going through, I don't know, like Psychology 101. And, like they're reading the first book and all of a sudden they're starting to like, diagnose you. And I'm like, whoa. Hey, like this is a friend of mine, actually. And I'm like, dude, like you just started. It's been a month. You think you know all of this? And you just, they're trying to sound out everything and trying to sound like they understand the material. Everything's complex. I'm like, the fact that, and that was like a big thing for me at the time, like the fact that you have to explain so much means that you know so little. And I feel like that's a lot, that happens a lot in the world of like social media and people that are trying to portray themselves as something bigger than they are. It's like that whole fake it till you make it persona, which I'm not a fan of personally. But for some, it works like gangbusters. I mean, it's insane. They could build brands around absolutely nothing.
It is unfortunate. I mean, especially, you look at certain blogs, you see it a lot where, the anonymity of some of the tools makes it even worse. But at the end of the day, people are, for the most part, pretty intuitive, and they can tell whether someone really understands something well enough that they can explain it, or are they just trying to make themselves feel more knowledgeable or more important than whoever they're talking to. People's instincts are usually right on the money when it comes to that. So at the end of the day, you just take it for what it is.
I appreciate that. Can I ask you a technical question? You don't have to answer if you don't want to or don't have the answer. But say you've got somebody listening, or just whoever. Say I wanted to launch a startup, and I needed to raise capital. What would be like some practical things? Because I know you've got this expertise, and I'm just like, well, what's like one or two things that, if I'm a 25-year-old kid, 30-year-old guy, 40, what doesn't matter, and I finally want to start my own thing. I'm very passionate about it. I'm very knowledgeable about it, but I need some working capital. What would I do?
The first thing is make sure that you have a story of what it is you want to do, why they should care, and why anybody would want to buy your business or service, and what differentiates you from anybody else that could be doing something that's the same or similar. Get that story honed, get people poking at it, get people that are your friends that will be candid with you and give you feedback on it, so that when you are trying to raise capital and you get that opportunity, the people you're going to interact with are going to decide very quickly, I mean literally probably within the first 2 minutes of you talking to them, whether you are worth their time or not. So you better have that story really well honed. You better believe it. You better be passionate about it, and make sure it's clear to them as quickly as possible why they would be interested in what you're doing.
Do you think the story is more important than the business itself?
I think it is just as important because if they're not aligned, I've seen a lot where, I talk to institutional investors all the time, and I had one tell me the other day, says, I've had 3 companies here come in that are nothing more than a PowerPoint. They're wasting my time. And I think it's important that you have a concept that's well thought out. You really know how you're going to go execute what you're going to do with the money. And it's very clear to them that you know what you're going to do once you have that money. So you've got to have your business model, your go-to-market strategy. Even if it's not documented yet, you have to be able to articulate it in a way that is very concise, but also recognizing the fact that whoever you're pitching to is not an expert in your area. You're probably one of many, many players that they're going to talk to that are, someone wants to start a bakery, someone wants to, start a semiconductor company. I mean, they're going to be all over the place. So you need to make sure that you've got that story as compelling and as concise as possible.
And just to clarify, by story, you're not saying like their personal story. You're referencing the business plan along with like, what is it, the thing that they're going to be doing, how they're going to be able to help, what is the offer, that kind of stuff? Is that what you're talking about?
It's all right. You've written a business plan. They're not going to read your business plan. All right. You got a couple minutes to give them the pitch. The story is, what is it that you want to do? What is it that makes you unique? What's going to differentiate you in the marketplace? Why are you going to be successful? And what's your goals here, short term and near term, if you get this money, so that they have a very clear picture of what it is you're trying to accomplish and why they would be interested in helping you go do that.
So they want to feel moved.
Yep.
So you have to be a good storyteller, or at least not good enough to be able to share your story. Yep. And they want to see if they're going to get a return on their investment. So is the thing that you're pitching them practical, and can they see it actually being having a positive return? And then the last thing would be is to do it in a way that, I guess, catches their attention.
Well, you want to capture their attention, but it also has to be, there's two other pieces. It has to be defensible, because they're going to poke at whatever your concept is, and they may poke at it from a less than kind approach about that basically is looking to see how you'll defend yourself and how well you believe in your business concept in a way that might be hostile. And then, is it more than just a concept? Have you really thought through what the execution side of it's going to look like? Are you going to have to go build brick and mortar? Are you going to have some kind of a asset-light business model? How are you going to distribute your product? They want to know that you're more than just a concept for a good idea, that you actually know how you're going to go execute that.
And is there a difference between like institutional investors versus like private investors?
Yeah, definitely.
Or independent, I mean. Sorry.
Yeah, if you're looking at like angel investors and personal investors, they tend to have a longer time horizon. They tend to want to be more involved in terms of providing help, providing guidance, maybe opening doors for you. When you get to the institutional side, it's much more, it's more transactional in that you have them as an investor and they're looking to get a return, but they also tend to bring more depth in terms of a particular focus area, because institutional investors tend to invest in certain industries or concepts and build portfolios around that. So they tend to have some pretty good depth of knowledge about the particular space you may want to be in.
Okay. So as a startup, would it be more, and I know I'm being technical, it's just I literally had a question like this pop up for the podcast a month ago. I didn't have anybody that could answer it. So here we go. If I'm a startup and it's going to be a relatively small company, would it be more advantageous to go through like an angel investor versus a institutional?
You probably won't get the institutional investors interested. Because one of the things that when you get to be the institutional investors, they typically have quite a bit of money that's available, and they're focused on, how quickly are they going to see the return, but also if they decide that they want to invest someplace else, how quickly can they get their money back out? And if you're in a startup, the ability to do that is extremely limited. So you really need to be focusing on venture capital and angels and high net worth individuals who have an appetite for investment.
Awesome. I got a personal question, and we're running out of time, but we've got a little bit of time left. Do you happen to have any children, wife, family, sisters?
I have a wife, been married, it'll be 35 years coming up. So,
wow, congratulations.
She tells me it's a life sentence with no hope of parole. So, no kids.
That's hilarious.
But pretty active in terms of the things that we do just with friends and neighbors and in the area, because we're fortunate to live in Austin, Texas, which is just a great place to be.
Ooh, almost moved there.
Oh.
Almost. I try to try to get my whole family. I have to like take my mom, my sisters. Like everybody's got to come.
Bring them all. There's something for everybody here.
I love it. I went and took a look at it, and I had a friend that moved like 20 minutes south of there, a little bit more space, a little bit more land. And he just absolutely loves it. He started a gym there and he's just thriving.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, just beautiful, beautiful place.
Well, I mean, if you are an entrepreneur in any way, this is a great place to be because the whole culture is just built around just entrepreneurs of one kind or another.
And I'm hearing it's going to get even more entrepreneurial. Mr. Tesla man himself.
Yep,
right?
He's moved here, and the factory that
he's officially moved there. The factory's already built.
Factory's built. It's operating, and he actually lives here now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So you're able to have like a full personal life doing the million things that you're doing on a daily.
You know, it's challenging for sure. But, you know, and most people that get into leadership roles typically have a lot of energy, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I was somebody that needed 9 or 10 hours of sleep, I'd be in trouble. But, you know, I just personally have a lot of energy. So when my day may be over, maybe I've been doing, you know, Zoom calls with Taiwan or Japan or whatever, you know, that may be at 8 or 9 o'clock, but chances are I'm still going to be up doing something interesting with friends, family, whatever after that. You just kind of carve out the time you need to because it's important to find somewhat of a balance between your personal life and work. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the fact that you've got a great support system with your wife. I mean, that is critical. I remember, you know, anytime my wife goes on like a little trip or whatever with her girlfriends or my daughter, she always threatens my life before she leaves. She goes, if I catch you talking to your girlfriend, and it's like a joke that we've got. She's like, she's dead meat when we get back. It's just so funny.
The good thing is you always know exactly where you stand, which is it's
I
important,
do.
You know?
I do. Yeah. That's awesome, man. This has been fantastic. I've personally learned a lot. I did have one other thing that I wrote down that I thought would be interesting for you to share. You started from what we would like to call the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In essence. Yeah. And you rose to the top, you developed skills, and you were able to maneuver yourself in positions based on the skills that you have learned. What kind of habits, and this is part of the show, I know, but what kind of habits did you personally have to develop? Now, I know you mentioned that you were blessed because you were surrounded by good mentors. Mm-hmm. But you can't just be successful. Like you could be the smartest person in the world, but if, like you said, if you sleep 9 to 10 hours a day, good luck, buddy. Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. One of the most important things is to develop habits that allow you to use your time wisely. So for example, I live a little bit out in the country, probably not too far from where your friend is, because I live a little south of town also.
Oh, very cool.
My drive in takes me about 30 minutes. That 30 minutes, you know, I'm not listening to radio. I'm not, doing all kinds of other things. I'm literally planning out what's my day going to be, what are the issues that I've got to deal with, what's the priority of them, and what are things that I absolutely have to get done versus things that can probably wait till later or never. So, I mean, that's literally how I start every day. And it's important to get really good routines to how you're using your time, because what happens with a lot of people, and part of why they don't make more impact, is they either become sort of inbox managers where they're just reacting to whatever's coming in, or they get to the end of the week and they realize I've spent my whole week doing things that really don't result in anything or don't really move the ball forward or aren't really important in terms of how I want to be seen as what I've accomplished. So you have to have the discipline to really focus on what's important and to not spend time on the other things. And that takes a lot of practice for it to really become, inherent in how you think and how you operate. And it all starts with what's your plan for the day.
I love that. You said something that really clicked, which was, so you're saying that if you don't figure out how to manage your time, all you're going to be doing is reacting. I feel like that's majority of people.
Oh yeah.
They wake up, they get their notifications, boom, boom, boom. Yep. Like it was the best thing in my life where I would either turn off my phone or put my phone in my home office and just leave it. And it's like this thing controls you. And you want to talk about like reaction. It's too much. It's consuming, like, I always think of like bandwidth, right? Yeah. Like if you got 100% for the day and you're giving like 1%, 2%, 6% throughout the day to this thing, my God in heaven.
And I'll bet you most people, it's a lot more than 5 or 6%.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you can track it now with the time spent on the platform.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wrong.
So it's all about focus. It's about knowing what it is you want to accomplish and prioritizing. And sometimes people think, oh, you know, you're being rude if you aren't responding to people, or if you're not reacting to everything that comes in. You're not. At the end of the day, people will understand it and they'll appreciate it. And what you might find is other people start to do the same thing. You know, your team starts to become more effective because they're spending time on the things that matter and that we're all going to get measured against versus, geez, I got to respond to this or I got to respond to that, you know?
I really think that you have a wealth of knowledge, and I could see you with a podcast. I really can.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially with like the network of people that you've built over the course of the years and the connections and having, you know what I mean? Like, you could have some phenomenal conversations and a lot of people would benefit.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's nice.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking to people though, because I always learn things from everybody I meet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, are you like, I know you're not like big into social, but do you communicate with anybody, connect with anyone? Do you do any kind of mentorship, coaching, or anything like that?
Well, you know, I'm always mentoring the people that are on our team, especially as we get younger players that join the team that don't have much experience in the working environment yet. Yeah, but for the most part, it's sort of ad hoc as things come along. If there's an opportunity to help somebody, I do that. Nothing really structured.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks. I appreciate you having me on. It was fun.